In just a couple of minutes, we're going to sing the hymn, I'm But a Stranger Here, Heaven is My Home. Just out of curiosity, is that a hymn that most of us like? Yeah, I see a whole bunch of hands going up. Yeah, it makes sense, doesn't it? I mean, the words are beautiful. I'm but a stranger here. Heaven is my home. Earth is a desert here. Heaven is my home. And so it focuses our attention where we want it. It's got a great melody. We're able to sing it with joy in our hearts, etc., etc., etc. But here's the question I have for you. Do you believe it? Or maybe I should ask it a little different way. Do our lives reflect the reality that we really do believe that we're strangers here and heaven is our home? Or not? Well, what would a life look like that really trusted, believed, confessed that I'm but a stranger here and heaven is my home? Well, obviously, spiritual matters would be by far the most important thing in our lives, right? Because if I'm but a stranger here and heaven is my home, then I want to make sure that my spiritual life is in order, and so spiritual things would absolutely become the most important thing in my life. Amen? Oh, come on. Amen? Amen. That's better. If I really believe that I'm but a stranger here and heaven is my home, boy, the first thing I would want to be doing with my time, my talents, and my treasures would be to use it for God's honor, right? Because if I'm but a stranger here and heaven is my home, then what do I want to be spending my time, my talents, and my treasures on? Well, obviously, I want to be spending those things on spiritual, eternal things. Amen? Amen. And so my question is that what our lives look like? Or, I struggle with it. You struggle with it too? Because we're sinful human beings, it's very easy for us to mouth with our lips, I'm but a stranger here, heaven is my home, and my heart believes it. But there's that oh so sinful side of my heart that fights it every step of the way. And so what does God have to do? Well, the first thing God has to do is remind us that we're forgiven, that Jesus really did die for us and really did rise for us. The next thing that God does is he gives us all these wonderful reminders of what really matters. And one of the ways that he reminds us about what really matters is by painting these wonderful pictures of heaven for us to whet our appetites for what's to come. And our text is one of those amazing pictures of heaven. So let's dive into our text a little bit. I'm going to first just address real briefly some of the questions that people have about this section of Revelation, and then we'll get into some of its applications for us. First of all, who are the 24 elders that are referenced in the text? Well, think back. How was the church built in the Old Testament? 12 tribes, right? That was the basic unit, the way the church was put together, were the 12 tribes. In the New Testament, what's the foundation? The 12 apostles. So you put together 12 plus 12, 24. It's pretty good with math. And so it's probably a picture of the entire church, Old Testament and New Testament, put together. What about the 4 living creatures? I found out last night that we have those 4 living creatures on the 4 corners of our cross. The 4 living creatures are probably angels. And the angels, one has the face of an eagle, one the face of a lion, one the face of an oxen, and one the face of a human. And what it's probably doing is saying God rules over all aspects of life. Wild life, domesticated animal life, human life, and the life that flies around up in the heavens. That God is in charge of all of it. And later after church, or as you're coming up for the Lord's Supper, check out our cross, because it reminds us of those wonderful truths. The prostitute, who is burned up. Wow, that sounds kind of vicious, doesn't it? Well, that's probably a picture of the false church. And that can either be people like Muslims who are overtly persecuting Christians, or it could be churches that teach false teaching. Because every false teaching ends up persecuting Christians too, either taking away peace that we should have or putting guilt on people that they should not have. There will be a day of reckoning. But oh, for you and me, it will be a wonderful day of joy, because then there comes that great multitude. And just who is that great multitude? That's you and me. And all those believers who have gone before us, all those believers who are on the world now, all the believers who will come after us from every tribe, nation, language, and people. And they'll be singing a wonderful song, which is going to be way cool to sing. And the angel calls to John and tells him that he needs to write these things down. Write, blessed are those who've been invited to the marriage supper of the Lamb. Why marriage supper? Well, probably because on this side of eternity, for most people, the closest relationship that they will experience is the relationship between husband and wife. Or at least that should be the closest relationship that most people experience. So what does God do? In amazing grace, God describes his relationship with you as the relationship between a groom and his bride. That God unites himself that closely to you and me. Are we going to be dressed for the occasion, dressed for the wedding banquet? Yes, you will be. Because God is going to give his saints, that's you and me again, fine linen to wear. And what is that fine linen which we will wear? It's described in our text as the righteousnesses of the saints. That's what the Greek literally says. The righteousnesses. What are the righteousnesses? Could be one of two things. Either it's the righteous verdicts that God declares about us human beings, because what does God have to do for us? Over and over and over again, God has to say to you and me, I declare you to be innocent. And every time God declares you to be innocent, it's as if he's reclothing you in the fine linen. Or it could be what our NIV translates it as, which is that's the righteous acts of the saints. And if that's the case, it's perhaps even more gracious. Because then what it's saying is that God is taking the deeds which you do out of thanks for him. He takes those deeds, which frankly aren't that impressive, because they're always tinged with sin, and God washes them clean. And God takes those deeds which you and I have done, he washes them clean and says, look at how pure and innocent you are in my sight. What amazing grace. And so it's no wonder that John is told to write this down. Because those who've been invited to the wedding supper of the Lamb, those people are blessed. The Greek word blessed has this really interesting connotation. It has the connotation of a life which is in balance, a life where things make sense. What is God saying? God is saying, if you are invited to the wedding supper of the Lamb, which you are, you've been baptized. God brings his word to you over and over again. God's going to feed you with his supper. You're invited. Those who have been invited to the wedding feast of the Lamb, their lives are in balance. How come? Well, let's think it through. If I know that I'm invited to the wedding supper of the Lamb, then when that boyfriend or girlfriend breaks up with me, I'll be able to handle it. Because I know that my most important relationship is my relationship with my God. Because that relationship's eternal. When the stress of life is washing over me and I just don't know how I'm going to get done everything that I need to get done, I'll be able to get it back into proper focus. Because I'll be reminded that I'm but a stranger here. And what seems to me to be so important today may be trivial by next week, or maybe by tomorrow. And I'll stay in balance. Most importantly, when death comes, I'll be able to stay in balance. Because I will recognize death for what it really is. This huge victory for the believer in Jesus. Because it's at our death time that we get to go home to heaven and join that marvelous group of people who are singing around the throne. And so when death comes, I'll not be floored by it. Oh, I'll cry my tears. Oh, I'll be sad. That's all fine. But I'll also stay in balance because I'm but a stranger here. And heaven is my home. Blessed are those who've been invited to the marriage supper of the Lamb. Or we could say, blessed are each one of you, because you've been invited. And oh, what a marriage supper it's going to be. You're going to get to meet Abraham and Sarah, Adam and Eve. I bet you they've had a few questions asked them over the years, huh? Noah and his wife, Shem, Ham, and Japheth and their wives, Mary and Joseph, Peter, James, and John, all those believing ancestors that many of us have who've gone to heaven before us, who we never even met. Wow, what a supper it's going to be. And it's never going to end. I'm but a stranger here. Heaven is my home. Do you believe that? Yes. And on this side of eternity, you and I may struggle to put it into action. We may struggle to make it clear. But thank God, I'm but a stranger here and heaven is my home. Doesn't depend on how much I believe it. It depends on how faithful my God is. And so what does he say at the end of our text? These words are true. You are a stranger here. Heaven is your home. That's the truth. Amen? Amen. And amen.